It's InterACT, a ministry with persons suffering from the AIDS virus, the subject of Austin Faith Dialogue today. Please join us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the show. And today we're privileged to have persons who are going to share with us the knowledge of InterACT, which stands for Interfaith AIDS Care Teams. It's a ministry of Austin Metropolitan Ministries extended to those who are suffering from the AIDS virus. It really takes a team effort for this to work. And for us to understand and appreciate how it works, we have today with us David Smith, the director of InterACT, and we also have Penny Terrell, who is a volunteer care team person from the Good Shepherd Episcopal Church. And we're delighted to have you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And would like to, first of all, have you tell us a little bit, David, about how InterACT started and something of how long it's been here and what it does.
Sure. InterACT started in January of 1994, and it started as a response by the faith community in this area, in the Austin area, to combat the isolation that people were experiencing who were living with AIDS. And they especially wanted it to be a faith response because for so long in the history of AIDS, the faith community had not done their part to support people living with AIDS. And so a group of ministers and lay leaders got together and decided to form InterACT, which starts the care teams and provides daily living activities, daily living support for people living with AIDS.
You say it's faith-based then, as distinct from some of the other services in town that are available to persons suffering from AIDS.
Right. Most of the volunteers, almost all of the volunteers, volunteer through their congregation, and that's where we go to recruit volunteers to the area congregations. And we're interfaith, so it would be to churches and synagogues.
I see. Okay. Now, one of these churches is Good Shepherd Episcopal Church.
That's right.
And you were sitting there one day and David called you. How did you get involved?
Well, he didn't exactly call me that way. There was an announcement in our church bulletin about a training for an AIDS care team. And I was looking for something to do that would be giving back to the community and through the church rather than doing something specifically directly at church, like teaching Sunday school or that type of thing. And I was interested in it, so I signed up for the training and went to the training.
And how long have you been doing this?
Just about 2 years.
Okay. Well, that's long enough to give us a little bit of a sense of what a team does. And how many persons, for instance, have you worked with during that 2-year period?
We've had 4 different partners, and it varies. It depends on the individual's need and their personality, how much you'll do for them and how much involvement there is. You can do a lot.
Penny used the word partners. David, is that an intentional way of describing the relationship?
It is. Rather than use the word client, which a lot of agencies use, or patient, we use the word care partner just to stress that they're a partner with, with us in their care. We're not trying to go in and take over their life or tell them how to live their life or tell them what to do. They're partners with us in trying to make the rest of the life that they do have as healthy and satisfactory for them as possible.
So it also implies that there's something reciprocal about that relationship. Partners usually give and take. And
There definitely is. It's interesting to, as you start working together as a team, to watch the team grow together and then to develop a real relationship with the partner that you have. And it's somewhat difficult to even describe how much we get back from having a relationship with a partner like that, and the strength that we derive from each other through helping
it's hard to
somebody else.
describe, but try.
Try. Sometimes it's actually overwhelming. It's incredible how close you come to these people, and I think the realization that their needs are not just from a medical standpoint, that some of them are just reaching out for human contact, and that they can't imagine initially that somebody can love them unconditionally. Mm-hmm. And when that realization takes place, it's pretty spectacular.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people living with AIDS may not have the support that they have to have just to live and meet their needs on a daily basis. So whether or not their family has abandoned them because they have AIDS, or it may be that they've been living with AIDS for so long and have gone through illnesses for so long that they've worn out their friends, and their friends just, while they want to be there for them, can't meet all of the needs that are there. There are a lot of needs involved with someone living with AIDS. And so this is a group that comes in, and out of 43 teams, and I've been doing this for 2 years now, not once has a team said, we've given more than we've gotten back. Every single team has indicated that they've gotten more out of this than they've given.
You've used a number here, and I don't mean to get too far away from what people are receiving as a benefit, both as either side of this partnership, but you said there were 43 AIDS teams. And before the show, you were telling me, Penny, that there are like 8 on your team.
Right.
Are there like 8 on most teams? Mm-hmm. 8 times 43 is...
It's a lot of people involved.
If I had my little calculator, I think it'd come out over 300, right?
That's right, that's right. And it's a lot more people involved than probably the community at large would think that church people or people of faith would be involved. Which means a lot added on top of the daily support, like transportation to doctor's appointments, which a lot of people get to a point where they can't drive, or picking up people's medications for them at the pharmacy, or child care. We do a lot of child care. Yard work, housekeeping, pet care. Yeah, there are things that people just can't keep up with that allow them to stay in their home longer, which is one of our goals.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, out of all those things, on top of that, here's a group of people from a church, which at first kind of scares off some people living with AIDS because they're worried about, since in the past people may have judged or tried to change people. And we don't do any of that. We don't proselytize people. We're not out to convert someone to our particular denomination or faith perspective. And we're certainly not out to try to change someone from a lifestyle that they are, or sexual orientation that they are. So it's an added, on top of the daily living support, a love, like Penny said, an unconditional love that allows them, maybe for the first time, to experience that love.
Okay, and the love is very practically expressed as far as the kinds of things that you were just, were there other things that came to mind that the team does, other than what David named?
A lot of companionship. I mean, taking them out to eat, just going over and watching a movie with them at their place if they don't feel like getting out, just sitting and talking with them. Even daily phone calls make a lot of difference.
You're implying that there's a lot of isolation surrounding the AIDS
frequently,
condition.
yes.
Yeah.
Frequently there is.
Okay. Well, I want to go back to one other thing you said, David, that it may be taking care of the children. I think there's a general perception that AIDS is a condition that is almost inseparable in many people's mind with the gay community. And you're suggesting that may not be so.
It's really not so at all. It definitely was predominant in the gay community when the disease began, and you can't minimize the effects that it has had on the gay community. And I think that a lot of the progress we've made, we actually owe to the gay community as far as education and even medical treatments that we have now that we didn't have before. So I don't want to minimize the effects it has had on the gay community, but where we are now with the disease is the fastest rising group of people with AIDS are women in their middle ages, and between the ages of 25 and 45.
Is that right?
And yeah, and then young people are the second, teenagers, for people who are contracting the virus are the second highest. So,
okay, so how do they contract it?
Any number of ways that you can get the virus.
Okay, what are some of
sexually
those?
transmitted,
Drugs.
drugs, yeah.
You can get it with taking unclean needles sort of thing, and
or anytime you put yourself at risk for someone else's body fluids,
But
you're
not
putting
at-
yourself at risk.
But not from like casual contact at all, that
Right.
type of thing. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about the transmission of the disease, and I think that frightens people who don't understand it.
Yeah, and you know, we've done a lot for education, and it's still frustrating when, you know, just a year ago there was the story that ran nationally of the mailman, a U.S. postal worker, who would not deliver the mail to a family that he knew was infected with AIDS, with HIV. And his reasoning was if he accidentally cut his hand on their mailbox, then there would be a chance for, and it's that kind of, there's still a misperception about how the disease is transmitted, which then translates into a fear of someone who's living with AIDS, which then translates into you don't want to be around that person. And thus the isolation.
That's
that
where the
people
isolation
experience.
comes in,
Yeah.
right. Well, I think that it sounds like your willingness, Penny, and those of others on your team, and among the other members of the 43 teams that you've got put together, that for folks to go into homes where persons are suffering from this AIDS virus, just to be close to them is significant to them. I mean, you know what it reminds me of a little bit is in biblical days, leprosy, where people didn't even want to get close to those that had that skin condition. And for Jesus to have actually come up and been in such immediate touch was healing in its effect. And that was almost a little sermon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Sorry about that. It comes out every once in a while. But, I mean, do you feel that that happens, that just your presence there opens things up for some folks?
Oh, I definitely do. And you were mentioning earlier about taking care of children. We happen to have one partner who had a family, and the children in that family were really needing some attention and some personal time with other people because the illness was taking so much of their mother's time. And that was an incredible experience, especially, we have some university girls on our team, and they were incredible.
From UT?
Yeah, and it was a great thing, I think, both sides, both for the children of this family and for them.
And so that brings up a point. You don't have to be a member of a congregation to be on a care team, and if your congregation doesn't have enough people to make up a team, we can combine you with another congregation to make up a team. So anyone is welcome to be on a care team.
I see.
And there's enough need, you know, there's definitely the need.
Well, I think that when we come back, we'll maybe look a little bit more at the extent of the need in Austin. There may be some perception that there's less of a need than there used to be. I know the Christopher House has closed down, and there's been a report that, well, maybe there are fewer incidents of AIDS in the city than there was before. Maybe there's a feeling that there's more medical remedies coming along. But for whatever the reason, that's an issue that I know is worthy of our commentary here today. But it's our practice here, a little ritual that we have on this show, to take a break, to catch our breath, and to invite people at home to do the same thing. We will be back in just a few moments, but invite you to stay with us on this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue, where we're talking about InterACT, this very special ministry with persons who are suffering from AIDS. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today our subject is InterACT, which is an acronym for Interfaith AIDS Care Teams, a ministry of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, and we've been talking to David Smith, the director of that program, and also with Penny Terrell, who is a volunteer care team leader with Good Shepherd Episcopal Church. Just before the break, we were just talking about the extent of the need in Austin. How many persons are identifiable as suffering from the AIDS virus at this time?
Right now, living in the Austin area, there are about 1,000, maybe 1,100 people living with AIDS in the Austin area. That is separate from how many people are living with HIV, which will develop into AIDS, probably.
Okay.
So that estimate, and we can only have an estimate because most of the people who are living with HIV don't even know it. And so the estimate is anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000. It's that broad of a range because we really don't know of people living with HIV. But living with AIDS, which means the disease has progressed to the point where either they've had an opportunistic infection or their T cell count is below 200, which means their immune system is very damaged, is about 1,000 people.
Okay, so there are a number of services available to these folks.
Sure.
Name some of the other services.
Some of the other agencies are AIDS Services of Austin, which is probably the largest AIDS service organization in the area, and they provide case management and education and things like rental assistance, assistance with paying your electric bill and that kind of thing. Project Transitions provides housing and hospice care for people living with AIDS. Informa SIDA is outreach to the minority communities. The HIV Wellness Center provides holistic therapies and help.
Pediatric AIDS.
Pediatric AIDS League provides daycare for children
Powell Clinic.
affected. Sure, the David Powell Clinic is very important and provides medical care for the indigent people who are living with AIDS.
Okay. You know, I've heard somewhere that Austin has probably more services for people with AIDS than any other community, or at least any other community our size in the country. So then the question is, why do we need InterACT if we've got all these other organizations going?
Well, everybody does their own thing, and no one's doing the kind of thing we're doing, which is a team approach to providing daily living support. And I think one thing Penny touched on, which is the most important part of it, is the companionship. Like we've already talked about, there's such a sense of isolation in it, and it's hard to imagine, but if you can think about if you've been sick before, which I'm sure you have, what it's like just to go through that time. And imagine if you really don't have any support, family, friends, whatever it may be that you need, and you're feeling bad on top of that, here's a group of people who are willing to give of their time. And with a team approach, the person doesn't have to worry about wearing out one person with all their needs.
I see.
And it also, for the team, they don't have to worry about getting burned out. It's not all up to one person. So that if Penny needs to go on a vacation with her family, she knows that she can do that, and it won't matter. The person will still get the help they need.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, Penny, I need to have the camera, if it can, zero in on your little lapel here.
Oh,
this
my
is
little red
what
ribbon.
you see a lot of, the red ribbon that so often is shown. I know celebrities wear this, and explain that, just for those of us that may never have had it explained to us before.
Well, for me, it's an outward sign of somebody caring about people that have HIV and AIDS, and that you're, willing to acknowledge the fact that it's there and help do something about it.
Okay. What's the history of it? Do you know, Dave?
I think it was just originally a design that someone came up with, part of a fundraising effort, and it just caught on, and it came about at a time when not many people were willing to publicly say that they supported AIDS. And so for the people who were wearing that, it was really kind of a renegade thing. Now, like hers is actually, is that metal or?
Yeah, this is an enameled one.
Enameled. So now it's so common that they have them with that. They even have diamond-studded red ribbons. Which,
Oh, I see.
but there's actually even.
When do I get mine?
You've actually earned it, believe me. There's some backlash to it in that some people thought that maybe people were willing to wear red ribbons but not willing to actually go out and provide care and service and love to people who are living with AIDS, which Penny obviously is. That's what she does through volunteering with InterACT. But they're still very common, and you still see them in the community and on award shows, like you said, celebrities
Right.
wearing.
And I understand now they've got other ribbons with other colors representing other diseases.
Right.
And so it's just a way of showing support. And I guess the thing that I can remember is that it took a long time for support and even financial support to grow to combat this in the 80s. I think we went through a good part of the 80s before there was finally some official government response to it. And by that time, the disease had gotten as much out of control as it did.
That's right.
And but are we making up for that now? I mean, is there some hope as far as the medical side of it?
I would hesitate to say making up, just to honor the memory of the people that we lost when we were all silent about it. When our government wasn't really willing to do anything, people were dying. And I don't want to, I say we're making up because we can never make up for those we've lost.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think spending increased definitely with the Ryan White Care Act that was passed. I think that was passed in 1990, I'm not sure. So you're right, we went through all of the 80s knowing what this was and seeing people die and seeing it spread. And finally did come around and do something about it. It definitely wasn't enough, and it's still not enough, but I don't think there's funding enough for any of the diseases that need research and care and support. Right. But we have definitely made progress, and there's progress recently with these protease inhibitors, which is a new class of drugs that's been of great benefit to a lot of people.
As I understand, that's not a cure, but it is a retarding the
Right,
development.
Definitely not a cure, and it is a good time to go back into what you were saying right before the break about Christopher House closing. I think there's a misperception that maybe we do have this solved and that it's not the problem that it once was, and that's not where we are in reality at all. That's a very strong misperception. Protease inhibitors are great drugs, and they're working great right now for a lot of people, but not everybody has these drugs or has access to these drugs and won't have access to these drugs, and they don't work for everybody who do have access to them. So we're still going to see a great need, and we're also talking about just our country. Worldwide, especially in Africa, there's a much larger problem with AIDS, and they'll, you know, where we are right now, they're not going to see these drugs at all.
I see.
So, but yeah, even in this country, you know, the need is we finally, I think, you know, have some light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there. And until we're there, we don't want to neglect the people that are living with this. And like I said, you know, even with this advances in drugs and medical therapy, we still have a lot of people who need services like care teams, which means their disease has progressed enough to where daily living activities are difficult.
Okay, before I forget it, let's ask the folks that can put up on the monitor the address, phone number. You know, here's the way people can get in touch with you, David.
Great.
Call you there at 472-4934. You office in the Austin Metropolitan Ministries complex there on Guadalupe, but you have a separate number.
Right, have our own number, and if anybody's wanting more information or wants to volunteer, and there are other ways to volunteer than being on a care team. We need office volunteers and volunteers to help us with events and all different ways to volunteer. Please give us a call.
Okay. Well, back to your volunteerism, Penny. I want to say that your witness in this regard, I think, can be especially meaningful to folks who may be looking in and are wondering if they have a call to do this. I mean, I really have the sense that to respond to someone whose condition is terminal, the closest thing I can think of is anybody who would volunteer to work with hospice, for instance. You're into the latter part of life with someone who is, so far this condition is irreversible once it's contracted, which means that you have in 2 years had 4 of your partners die on you.
Right.
And that's tough.
It is. It really is.
And tell us how you cope with that.
I think the easiest way to cope with it is to realize that you did do something for these people. And you have to remember, too, that besides them dealing with the illness, mostly all these people have dealt with a great number of deaths of people very close to them. So they experience that again continually every day as they think about how much longer they may have to live. And it's pretty tough that way. And I just think that knowing that you made a little bit of difference to somebody, and that you can do, if you've done it once, you can do it again. You can do it for somebody else.
We've got the greatest volunteers in the world. I really believe that. And she's being modest and saying made a little bit of difference. And we have great volunteer retention, meaning people stay involved a long time. And I think it's exactly because of what Penny said. They get to see face to face that they're making a huge difference in someone's life. And you know, who doesn't want to do that? It is hard, and it's painful, and there is a bond there, and a love there that's hard to let go. But it lasts beyond that person's life. And a lot of the people that Penny and her care team have helped, and all the care teams have helped, live on in the memories we all have of them. So.
Well, the thing that comes to mind, of course, too, is that the word interim comes to my mind, that we all live in the interim.
Right.
And some of us have a little confused about just how long we have, but it's later than you think. But I think that in your training, you would need to help people come to terms with, you know, when you do bond and how close you do come, that you also have to provide some distance.
Sure, a distance. Yeah, we really do, though, encourage people to get close, and definitely not in a way where they're going to be so overwhelmed if someone dies that they can't even function. I mean, obviously.
Right.
But we encourage the close relationship, and while it makes more pain, it also makes more love there between them. And I wouldn't say that we, try to discourage people from getting too close to their care partner. And it's something really that we don't have control over anyway.
Right. It just
They go into the house,
It just happens, right.
and they love these people, and the people love them, and so.
And you can see it in other team members. They start off and they're just sort of nonchalant. They don't think that they're going to get personally involved, and then you watch it change.
Right. That's right.
So it just happens and it grows, and
Yeah.
and I think of an old Scottish prayer that says, Lord, we know not what a day may bring forth, but only that the hour for serving Thee is always nigh.
All right.
And so we can take that as something that we can all live by. And I want to thank you, David Smith, for being here.
Thank you.
Spending this part of your life with us. And Penny Terrell as well.
Thank you.
And to you folks for looking in. Join us again next week on our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Rich Thompson, and peace be with you.